So it's going to be a standing video. I can't sit down. It is unbearably hot and unbearably uncomfortable. I hope the fans that I've got rocking here don't interfere with the audio. I did some testing, so I think everything should be fine. But no way can I sit down and kind of just exert pressure explaining things as I'm sitting for this video, because despite all the fans, I'm just really uncomfortable. And opening the window just makes it worse. But I have a video by the user Academy of Ideas. It's one of these users that I watch every so often, and every time I watch him, I'm like, oh, that's one to respond to sometime later. And I think this is the 4th or 5th time that I've singled out one of his videos, and I said, I'm going to respond to it sometime later. And that was last week, and I realized, well, I really should just go with this one as a response, because it distills so much. There's a lot of people who they think past the status quo, so they think past the ABCs and perhaps the D and the E and the Fs, and they think past up until a certain point, and they think they've arrived at the very final conclusion, even though they've got like well over half of the alphabet left. And it's just, there are a dime a dozen on YouTube, and there's never ceases to amaze me how they can't see that they've only thought up until a certain point, and beyond that they just can't think. Not to say that I'm at the XYZ stage, but clearly I see where they've gone awry, and I want to just talk a bit about it. The video is called, see, now I'm going to have to bend down every time I look at the video because I'm standing up. Maybe I could have just lifted the laptop on another stand, but that's too much effort. The video is called "Why an Obsession with Safety Creates Sick Minds in a Sick Society." Let's start.
Condition for being a hero. If a man wants to become a hero, the snake must first become a dragon. Otherwise, he is lacking his proper enemy.
Don't worry, he won't be poetic the whole way through, but yeah, there's a dose of semi-poetry here and there, and that's how the points are cloaked, and that kind of presents an extra vigor to the intellectual status of the point. I guess people love this stuff, and I'll just try not to mock it, because in the past I've played some semi-poetic stuff and I get bogged down in mocking those aspects, but that's just style, and I should be willing to excuse all that, which I'll do my best to excuse here. But yeah, he does go heavy on the poetry. Maybe not so much in this video, but in many of the other videos. It's unbearable. It's not my preferred style of doing philosophy. This is purportedly a philosophy channel, and I don't like the fact that he does that, but I'm not gonna mock it or do anything pertaining to it. I'm just gonna assume that everything is dry, and I'll just block out all the poetic stuff.
Age has been called many things, but its proper enemy. Our age has been called many things, but an age of cowards may best describe it, given the immense feat.
Of all the things, probably starting with idiocracy, a lot of other negative qualities we can ascribe to our age, he chooses cowardice as the top of the list. Well, that requires some sort of empirical demonstration. Hopefully he'll provide it. Spoiler, I've seen the video, I've seen it twice. He doesn't provide it.
Fear, anxiety, and helplessness that most people display in the face of even trivial threats. We are not a generation.
See, this would have been a good point to demonstrate what he means by specifically a trivial threat. What's a non-trivial threat? Give an example of those two types of threats. Like a trivial threat might be something like you're walking by a street and there's a reckless driver, and you're nowhere near the reckless driver, but you see the reckless driver kind of steering toward you, and then you kind of just back all the way to the sidewalk, and you just see him carry on his way. So maybe that's too lax to even be a trivial threat for his sake, for his purposes, but I would say that, yeah, he was kind of going full speed towards you for a few seconds, and you just backed off to the sidewalk, and now you have surmounted this trivial threat, and the reckless driver is on his way. Whereas a non-trivial threat would be if you were actually literally a couple of inches away from the reckless driver, driving as crazily as he did, and you just skirted it by a few inches. there. Trivial versus non-trivial threat. It's important to specify what exactly you mean by these kinds of different categories you apply. And so if you really do specify it that way, do you actually think that what he said about the average person not being able to cope with even a trivial threat, now that I've explained what I think of as a trivial versus non-trivial threat, do you actually think that this setup is going to work? Let me rewind by a few seconds.
Our age has been called many things, but an age of cowards may best describe it, given the immense fear, anxiety, and helplessness that most people display in the face of even trivial threats.
Most people will display fear, anxiety, helplessness in the scenario I just sketched briefly. I don't think they would.
We are not a generation that moves forward into the uncertain future in a bold and heroic manner. Instead, most people fear the future and prefer safety, comfort.
I've read so many comments on this video, not a single person held him to the fire. Like how he knows people in previous generations, in previous ages, epochs, had such a higher rate, right? The rate of all these good things that he's talking about were actually achieved by so many more people, and that age had such higher rates of this kinds of undertaking. Like, you have to actually demonstrate that with something. It doesn't have to be conclusive evidence, but you have to show that you've just made an empirical claim. And the video has what? 320,000 views. How many comments? As of this time, 3,290 comments. I've read so many of the most highly upvoted ones. No one thought to ask, how do you actually know that all these people from, I guess, 60, 70, 80 years ago and before were such danger seekers and risk takers to such a higher degree that you're willing to summarize the current age as the age of cowardice? Like, that's the first thing you have to do before you get philosophical. Just actually supplement your big talk with some kind of empirical observation. I know it's hard to gather stats on the old pre-modern ages. We didn't have statisticians do this. We didn't have social scientists. We didn't have a lot of things. But because the evidence may be missing, then you can't do comparative analysis by age, because the previous ages, we didn't really know what the average person was up to most of the time. So he's just demeaning the current age as if, I don't know, like, did he just watch films that were recorded like in the 50s, 60s about those ages, and that kind of gave him the idea that, like, the film is in some way representative of what the average person did 80 years ago and prior or whatever? Because we know a lot of these great all-time films were made around the mid-20th century, and they presented previous ages. At that point, they presented them as this great ages of heroism and stuff like that. But you can enjoy those films and still understand that that's nothing. like Dirty Harry was not the average type of person at any point in history, or whatever, Hercules or all these other great protagonists as depicted in the movies. No, that type of person was always an outlier. It doesn't matter how far back you go in history, that type of person was glorified as the protagonist in all these films, or maybe the anti-hero in all these films that he wants to sort of portray as the average. No, it was always an immense outlier. It's just so sloppy empirically, and then, as you'll soon find out, it's philosophically sloppy as well.
And ease of life, to risk-taking, experimentation, and freedom. Or as the 21st century sociologist Frank Furedy writes, young people are socialized to feel fragile and overawed by uncertainty, and as a result, the defining feature of the current Western 21st century version of personhood is its vulnerability. Although society still upholds the ideal of self-determination and autonomy, the values associated with them are increasingly overridden by a message that stresses the quality of human weakness. And if vulnerability is, indeed, the defining feature of the human condition, it follows that being fearful is the normal state.
So they started talking about young people, and the worst stories relating to the young people, from the college dorm room scandals, from all the other kinds of professors and other tenured faculty and admins not having a spine and a backbone, to stop them at their tracks. That's always kind of used as, because those things went viral a bunch of times and are legitimate problems, we kind of assume that all the non-college going young people, or all the people just going to these middle of the road colleges that don't, where these kinds of news stories don't emerge, because, well, students are mostly sane, you can't use it as evidence that generalizes to such a degree. But I'll let him go on.
Overawed by uncertainty, fearing the future, conceptualizing oneself as vulnerable, weak, and fragile is not a recipe for individual or social flourishing.
And neither is conceptualizing oneself as invulnerable, which I think is at the heart of why a lot of people thumb up this video. Interruption time. It's going to be the only interruption in the whole video, because it's not like I have that much time given how long the video is. But I did watch this back and I realized that this specific point, I called out the infallibility penchant, and that I didn't point to in the video. I didn't name the culprit for that, at least in terms of the psychological processes that go into it. And it's this stuff that's been documented in terms of the survivorship bias. And then in the introduction, they speak of danger specifically, so it would behoove me to read it. Another example of a distinct mode of survivorship bias would be thinking that an incident was not as dangerous as it was because everyone communicated with afterwards survived. Even if one knew that some people are dead, they would not have their voice to add to the conversation, leading to bias in the conversation. So this kind of stuff really has been under-discussed when you compare it to victim mentality or persecutory delusion, right? It's been covered by so many outlets, and I would say rightly so, but for balance, we should point out that a lot of people are in the grips of this as well, and both are mistakes. So really, for every 1 minute that you've seen, or every 1 hour, let's say, that you've seen devoted to victim mentality or persecution complexes and stuff like that, really, for every 1 hour of that, can we even think of a few seconds being devoted to the phenomenon of survivorship bias? I don't think so. But also I would like to see, just exploring how many people are biased by this versus stuff like this. So if this is in the majority, then it is perfectly justified that various commentators would focus on the phenomena that are actually plaguing the majority. But I don't think it's anywhere near as lopsided to justify the neglect of the survivorship bias. I don't think that it's like we can count on one hand the amount of people who suffer from this, and thus the lack of highlighting it in various journalistic endeavors, let's just say, or other kinds of podcasts or any other kinds of discussion among the intelligentsia. There's way more people who suffer from this, and it should receive adequate focus in proportion to this. And also, in looking all this up, I looked up learned helplessness, and it was funny. Over the past few decades, neuroscience has provided insight into learned helplessness and has shown that the original story, the original theory, actually had it backwards. The brain's default state is to assume that control is not present. Crucial compared to what Academy of Ideas had kind of just naturally assumed, and that it is modernity that's made it not present. But no, the brain's default state is to assume that control is not present, and the presence of helpfulness is what actually is learned first. However, it is unlearned when a subject is faced with prolonged aversive stimulation. So I just also had to throw that in. Anyway, I don't want this interruption to go on for too long because the video itself is way too long. So I'm just going to resume to the video itself. But yeah, the simple gist for here was this is actually a thing, and a fair number of people that I've run into, I know this is just anecdotal, but a fair number of people that I've run into suffer from this, perhaps more often than I've seen people who suffer from this. And so I just like to see coverage represent that proportionally. But I don't have stats on that. All I have is my own anecdotal observations. So I'm sure they're not that far off. All right, back to the video. Now, I should point out that even if that's wrong, and the viral video goes viral precisely because it is representative of what younger people are like these days as compared to 20 years ago and before. I guess when he says young people, I shouldn't go really that far. I go like 8 decades for era, and then I go 20 years for young people. That's just how I thread that needle. But it could be the case that the viral content that everyone's focusing on, and in terms of this safetyism stuff, it could be true that it goes viral precisely because it is representative, and it's not just these college-going people who have turned everything upside down. And it applies to just about all young people. Now, I don't think it applies to all young people, or most young people, across the West. It may very well apply to most young people within North America. And he started out kind of inveighing against Western world when it comes to the problem of pedestalizing safety, or however he put it. And then he transitioned to talking about the young. So he's talking about a subset of the Western population. And as I would think, even in the worst case, for my counterpoints, the worst case would be it is a large subset that generalizes to young people, but only on this continent. It doesn't generalize to young people across Western Europe, Northern Europe, or hell, the rest of the world. So that's certainly important, because where have you heard about these scandals in other than occurring in North America? Have you heard about the scandals of the young people demanding this and that and turning everything upside down because they want every single little neurotic need to be accommodated for everywhere they go? I really only hear about that taking place in North America. So he should have just, if he had just narrowed his ire to this continent, I wouldn't even feel the need to nitpick that stuff. But he takes a mighty swing at the beginning of the video, and then he just zeroes in on a subset of the population. And then, if you ask me, it's just a subset that is guilty of something, but only guilty in a certain continental context, not a global context, or a Western European context. Now, it also could be the case that we are seeing things that were every bit as true decades ago, but there was just a taboo around talking about it. So the idea that mental health has gotten worse, that's a very difficult question to answer, because it could be the case that a bunch of undiagnosed mental health problems existed all along the way, and now people are just encouraged to come out and talk about it. So are we really taking a turn for the worse, or have things always been as bad as they are on the mental health front, but people just shut the fuck up about it? People just bottled it up. I'm inclined to think it's the latter. But if anyone has any actual work that probes this, it's a very hard thing to probe, so I'm sure no one does. Yeah, by all means, share it. But we have every reason to think that mental health decline, incline, no, it doesn't really, it's kind of stable across generations. And the reason it seems that we're in a downfall in terms of mental health right now is just because we have encouraged, especially over the last decade, so many powerful institutions have encouraged people to just come out and not be secretive about their issues. And realistically, it's probably still, it would even be a bigger downfall if it didn't hurt one's employment prospects as much, because you still got to fill out these forms about just, do you have a history of mental illness and this and that. So we haven't de-tabooed mental health yet. Wait till we fully de-taboo it. This guy's gonna be making like even more videos, because he's gonna associate the fact that people are more comfortable coming out and talking about these issues. He's gonna associate that as a spike in mental health as such. Mental ill being as such. Mental illness. Whereas no, I'm far more inclined to think that it's just, there was kind of a culture of secrecy about it, or people didn't even know what they had. They just kind of thought that they were weird, and they were the only ones who were weird because they had, whatever, PTSD or something. Ooh, but wait till we get to PTSD as something he doesn't mention at any point in this video. You're kind of gonna promote risk-taking and danger-seeking, but not mention the reality of PTSD as something that can worsen one's mental health? Well, that's just trying to square the circle.
Overawed by uncertainty, fearing the future, conceptualizing oneself as vulnerable, weak, and fragile, is not a recipe for individual or social flourishing.
Yeah, so I don't think anyone should fear the future, but I think it makes sense to be pessimistic about what the future may bring. You don't have to do that as a kind of emotional outburst. You don't have to be extremely concerned about all these things that I'm not going to bore the audience about now, but all these things that, yeah, are kind of looking grim. And yeah, I don't think it's asking too much to just diagnose the future, the odds of or this or that bad outcome, and to do it in a clinical, detached way. The kind of the anti-Greta Thunberg way. Yeah, I'm all for that. But then there's two very different things. Like, would he also take issue with that? Just being extremely negative about what tomorrow may bring, but then not letting it get to you mentally? Or would he say that, no, we ought to be optimistic, irrespective of what being pessimistic about the future, whether or not it comes with this kind of emotionally turbulent attitude, we just got to be optimistic about the future per se. That's also something that leaves up to interpretation in the video. I'm all for being concerned about the future. Don't have to do it in any sort of hyper emotional way.
Rather, this way of life promotes mental illness and paves the way for authoritarian rule.
No, it doesn't promote. You know what promotes mental illness? The odds of being born to a family with mental illness. Paves the way to authoritarian rule. Listen to this.
And its way of life promotes mental illness and paves the way for authoritarian rule.
Yeah, so first of all, he needs to, as the one who is making the bold claims, he needs to just consult mental health specialists and just ask them. They'll give different answers, but then just ask them, what % of mental health issues are brought about by just bad habits, bad behavior, bad life choices, versus what % of them are heritable? That's one way to just cut across at least 50% of what he's diagnosing here. Because yes, roughly, and more so than 50% of the time, it has to do with something that you've inherited. And no better lifestyle is going to be decisive. You could at most reduce the negative effects of it, but you're not going to be completely decisive in overturning it because you behave differently. If you inherited it, you're going to be struggling with it to whatever extent. Good versus bad habit cultivation can at most kind of tug it in a less damaging direction. But then this second part, it opens us up to authoritarian rule. Think about just the most safe, pro-safe societies you know of, and how many of those, like some, for example, seatbelt regulations, demanding that people wear helmets if they're riding a motorcycle, or hell, even a bicycle, which I'm technically supposed to do, but I don't do. I buck that rule, and I'm in my own very way being a risk taker by having the cops maybe at some point not just give me a warning, but a fine. But just think about all these societies where there have been, to one or another extent, nanny state after nanny state policy passed. That just pretty much the average OECD society has these kinds of better safe than sorry measures. And yet, decade after decade, the nanny state remains in effect, and yet no political scientist, no political theorist summarizes any of these societies as authoritarian societies, as societies ruled by men as opposed to laws. Decade after decade, right? It just reminds me of Hayek's Road to Serfdom, and the fact that all these people who argued Hayek vigorously, the Hayek prophecies is just about to come true. It's right around the corner. It's right around the corner. If you have a non-minimal state, like the state ought to be minimal, but if it goes beyond minimal to some sort of non-minimal category where it takes up whatever % of the economy or some other kind of, if the military gets too big, just you wait. You're going to usher in authoritarianism and totalitarianism even. And just we see society after society, decade after decade, not plunge into that. And so maybe they want to say it hasn't been long enough, and just you wait. But then again, if I were doing this video in, as opposed to 2021, if I were doing it in 3021 or 4021, and we still haven't had these nanny states or other kinds of non-minimal states with a high military or high something, high level of economic interventionism, right? Would it be the case that it would still be saying this in 4021, 2,000 years from now, right? And if there's one instance of that sort of plunge happening, well, they would point to it. Even if that much time passes, they would point to it and they would say, see, we were right all along. Like, they'll ignore all the times it doesn't actually happen, and then they will think the prophecy has been secured because of just one anomaly where it does happen. And they can't even get the chain of causation right, whether the non-minimal aspect of it, the size of the government, was decisive in causing the authoritarian plunge, whereas the authoritarian plunge could have happened even within a minimal state. So that's kind of roughly analogous to this. A society that elevates safety, I wouldn't say we're doing it as a safety as a primary value. We haven't done it, but without any evidence, he's connecting the dots. It opens us up to authoritarian rule. So he just diagnosed all of the West as being obsessed with safety, unduly obsessed with safety, and I guess for enough decades now. But then why haven't we had, or like, where's this onset of authoritarianism? Is it just another just you wait? Is it just another kind of incarnation of the Hayekian boilerplate? That's exactly what it is.
And so, as we will explore in this video, the world would benefit if more people were willing to live just a little more dangerously. For danger, when a byproduct.
Yeah, a little more dangerously. So, this is a very modest claim. He's going to make a bunch of claims later on in the video that are highly immodest and completely at odds with what he just said here. A little more dangerously. But then he'll use words like, we've deified safety.
Product of pursuing worthwhile goals or in defense of values like freedom, justice, or peace is life.
All of those values can be pursued without doing something that is dangerous for the sake of it being dangerous, right? So then he just connects all these other kind of worthwhile, choice-worthy aspects of one's life that have, in principle, don't have anything to do with danger, but then he will try to make it seem as if those are worthwhile precisely because of the danger element. But why would it necessarily be the case that if you just want to be like a productive, let's say, civic agent who goes to town halls, who keeps up with what the local authorities, the bureaucrats are doing, right? So he's mentioned justice here as one of the things. Like, yeah, you can keep tabs on all that, and you can be an outspoken civic agent, but like, why would danger figure into any of that? So like, no. We have to hold his feet to the fire. It has to be dangerous for the sake of dangerous. It can't be just danger is a happenstance there that you have to surmount because the situation just unfolded in such a way that this choice-worthy pursuit involved danger. No. You're telling people that danger as such is choice-worthy. So don't now piggyback on all these other things. Talk about danger in and of itself, and why a life that doesn't contain much of it or any of it is necessarily worse off. That's how you started. That's how your feet should be held to the fire. Danger as something that is just kind of instrumentally in the way, fair enough. People shouldn't immediately run from it. But then we're getting to the cost-benefit aspect of it. Just how dangerous and just how big is the payoff? There's nothing even remotely close to that kind of a question. Just how dangerous and just how huge is the payoff? Like that's the fundamental question you got to pose. It's not posed by any commenter. It's not posed by anyone, any part in the video. There's really no size-based questions. The scope of the two items within the trade-off.
If promoting, and as the Roman historian used like freedom, justice, or peace, is life promoting, and as the Roman
So life promoting, Jesus, hang on. You know what's also life promoting? Every subsequent generation, some of which will be cowardly to some extent. And so this whole idea that life promoting, he halos the word life, even though it is only within life that all these things that he's repulsed by all these qualities and character traits that he's repulsed by, it is only within life that those things can exist. So he puts this giant halo in a bunch of his videos around the word life, so life promoting, but it is the fact that you promoting life, you're promoting all these things that are also negative. And so wouldn't it be the case that if you designate the lone contributor of this value as, let's say, cowardice, and the lone contributor to value as the trait of courage, if the modern world contains too much cowardice and nowhere near enough courage, then life itself should not have a big giant halo around it, because it is only through life that that kind of outcome will be eventuated. An outcome where cowardice just completely squashes courage. But see, he can't think of it that way. Because he will export the cowardice as being somehow detached from life. No, cowardice just is a component of life, just as courage is. So that's why you should have an ambivalent attitude toward life. But he has a positive attitude toward life, even though it is only within life that all these things that just repulse him can exist. So at most you should have, and again, the more cowardice exists over courage, the less ambivalent and the more steering toward negative your attitude toward life should be within that given period that you're describing right now, which I guess is modernity. I don't think that's the case. You haven't come close to describing that that's the case. Statistically, quantitatively, that the average person is far more cowardly in the modern age than they were 80 years ago, 180 years ago. Like, you haven't even began making that argument. But if that is in fact true, then stop talking about life as something that is always to be affirmed. Because whatever is good in life is being trumped by this bad stuff. And I'm not saying courage and cowardice are these bearers of intrinsic value and disvalue. I'm just kind of humoring him and placating him to show why his own rhetorical approach to the word life is incoherent on his own terms.
Historian Tacitus put it, "The desire for safety stands against every great and noble enterprise."
See? So a second ago, just be a little more danger-seeking, and now a quote like this that he parades around. The desire for safety stands against every great and noble enterprise. Every single one! Every single one. No, not certain ones, not, I would say probably a very narrow minority, but no, every great and noble enterprise. So the enterprise is undertaken by your Albert Einsteins, your Richard Feynmans, your Alan Turings, your go on forever like this. Right? There's no sense in name dropping. We've known enough of these kind of, just nerdy, I'll just think my way through life and invent great things and solve great mathematical puzzles. Well, that's all perfectly compatible with living a safe lifestyle and entirely incompatible with being a risk taker and a daredevil. So then you just box yourself in to having to say that those people actually didn't undertake great and noble enterprises. But at least some of their enterprises you're a beneficiary of, because you're using technology that in all likelihood, at least had some of them not lived the way they lived, you wouldn't be able to enjoy. So scratch every great and noble enterprise and say maybe a few great and noble enterprises that are cut out for a specific type of temperament, and then, yeah, I'll let this kind of quote slide. But it's just so absolutist. And absolutist, but just 30 seconds ago, 45 seconds ago in the video, he said people should live a little more dangerously, right? So you can see how he crisscrosses between just being modest and incredibly immodest and over the top, just, I don't know, what specific unsafe activity would he say is too unsafe? Is parkour too unsafe? Well, I would say it's certainly too unsafe for most people. But yeah, there's a minority of people who've done it, and I wouldn't tell them that they shouldn't be allowed to do it. I would just kind of tell them to think a little more about the failure rates, about the people who have ended up, well, either fatalities or lifelong injuries, paralysis, right? Certainly, you talk to someone who is just entirely invested in parkour enthusiast, it's like, well, how much time do you spend looking at all the people who are just now living the rest of their lives in an ICU or something like that? And then if they say, oh yeah, I've thought about all that, I've taken it into consideration. Great, you've taken it into consideration, do your thing. But see, in this entire video, the word fatality, the word injuries, the word paralysis, all these things that can befall people who take this advice are never brought up. So what the hell is the point? You can't even devote 20 seconds to the specific tragedies that can befall you when you're living this kind of life. If you had actual confidence in your position, then that's precisely what you would do. You wouldn't just mention it, you would actually point to footage of people who have messed themselves up and are now in a paralyzed state, in a kit, like their whole body is in a cast. And you would say, despite that, like you would point to the graphic nature of it, and you would describe it with soaring detail. And then you would say, it's worth it. That's how you make a case for anti-safetyism. Like anti-safetyism on steroids. That's what you do. You get really detailed about the worst case scenarios, the actual cost. And the moment you start doing that, you'd realize that, oh, well, no, we're actually probably more. There's probably more adrenaline junkies nowadays than there ever were, because now we've got all these devices that can record people. And yeah, there's no shortage of recordings. I can probably spend the rest of my life just watching different people do extremely dangerous things, which would have been unimaginable just 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if there had been that many people, such a wide array of people doing all these death-defying stunts. I mean, I'm just thinking of they're coming out with Jackass 4 later this year. I can't wait. I've always enjoyed that, but at the same time, I hope all those guys know that could be pushing up daisies if just one little thing goes wrong. As one of their crew members, Ryan Dunn, certainly has been for over a decade now. He died in 2011, so maybe it'd be interesting to ask the Jackass crew, right? Was Jackass worth it if, absent Jackass, Ryan Dunn would have still been alive? See, that's a kind of a crunch. That's a kind of corner case where it's like, maybe there won't be consensus among the crew. Maybe they will all have said, well, if the only way for Ryan Dunn not to end up dead in 2011 is for him not to go the Jackass route and to therefore not do this crazy drunk driving thing, yeah, maybe then Jackass was not worth it. So you gotta put the freaking, you gotta put them on the spot. And even in this video, if you're making the we've had too much safety argument, still put people on the spot. Give them the worst case scenario and tell them, if you drown yourself in risk taking, that worst case scenario will eventuate or has eventuated, because there's no shortage of things that already did eventuate, like the Ryan Dunn death. But he doesn't come close to doing any of that. He won't spare 20 seconds to it, let alone show it in all its graphic detail. But he's kind of, what, a YouTube philosopher? Pitiful excuse for philosophy.
Not all societies, however, have ranked safety as high on the scale of values as does the modern West.
So again, not empirically shown whatsoever. There's also a complication here because the modern West is far more technologically and certainly digitally infiltrated, right? So just think about it. Show someone in the year 1800 the roads, the reality of the day-to-day traffic environment. They'd be petrified by it. These 2 tons, like any random person, we don't know them, but our safety is in their hands anytime we get out on the road. Yeah, that's a freaking daunting thought if you just pluck someone out from previous eras and you show them, and you show that any given one of them can be completely boozed up, any given one of them can be neurotic, and yet we just sort of trust that things will be okay on the road. Because we need to get from point A to point B. And then I think if we even told people from these previous bygone eras that, oh yeah, there's a certain number of fatalities on the road, roughly around 40,000, varies from country to country, but roughly around 40,000. And if we just had different speed limits, that would make things far less expedient, there'd be far more nuisances, the pace of life would be kind of, it would drag more. But yeah, we could prevent a number of fatalities, perhaps up to thousands and tens of thousands globally per year, if we just made speed limits far more, just far more rigid, they would say that's exactly what you have to do. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if that's kind of the average response from people in those bygone eras. But nowadays, I don't think that would be the response. I think we would say, no, we'll take all those fatalities because we want the expedience. Because the change in expedience would be so massive and it would downgrade it so much for so many more people that we're willing to take on those kinds of fatalities and serious injuries, even more so. Forget fatalities, perhaps the being in the ICU is worse as a result of car collisions. And so against all that, like, is it really all that clear that the modern West is really that obsessed with safety? No, it's just far more technologically enhanced. And so you're not counting in, you're discounting the danger rising elements and other kinds of adversity increasing elements resulting from that kind of technologicalization. And then certainly we can talk about other kinds of risk seeking we all engage on digitally by having all these, passwords and accounts and stuff like that can be hacked. That's something people of yesteryear never had to worry about. So there's just all other kinds of reasons as to why it's far from clear, and I might argue to the contrary of what he is, that modern people are just completely drenched in ideology of safety. No, just look at how much more dangerous things are just by stepping out. If you live in a city, just by stepping out and just being this close to 2-ton vehicles driving by, if you just kind of wandered a bit further out in the road, you would have been done with. That was not the reality back in the day. And you have to account with all that.
Many flourishing societies of the past considered safety to be a secondary value and showed a remarkable capacity to take risks.
It's perfectly fine to consider it a secondary value, but you're kind of not even saying it ought to be tertiary. It's just got to be at the bottom of the barrel. Now, I wouldn't designate it to a secondary value if we're just having a common understanding of safety, where it's just a proxy for well-being. It's just kind of stand-in for welfare. There's probably some sort of bones you can pick with that. We can tease the two concepts out apart. But, I mean, why wouldn't he use welfare? Because I think that you take him in certain of his moods, he might as well be talking about welfarism as well here. And it's saying the theory of value known as welfarism is mistaken. And he just doesn't just want to pluralize it with some kind of non-welfarist ingredients and have just a bog standard hybrid account of intrinsic value. No, he wants to go full-blown anti-welfarist. That's my sneaking suspicion. And it's not just based on this video, it's based on a lot of his other videos that clearly... And that's not reasoning, right? That's I speculate, both with him and with all the commenters who show up there, that's just evolutionary instincts. And at the root of it is a kind of insecurity. If you advocate for welfarism in any of its forms, right? Because it's just a wide account of different types of things that can qualify as welfare. Like, for example, Derek Parfit, I queued this up. Derek Parfit promulgated a kind of theory called preference hedonism as an extension of hedonism, asserting that happiness alone leads to a good life. Preference hedonism differs from other forms of hedonism by rejecting common, rigid definitions of pleasure and pain. Torture, a painful experience, might lead to a better life if one desired it over alternatives, such as divulging the truth. Unsurprisingly, preference hedonism is a preference-dependent theory, because happiness exists only within our own heads and never independently. Preference hedonism is also psychologically dependent. So it, like it explains, it broadens our conception of what is intrinsically good and bad, but not anywhere to the point where something like just the danger in and of itself, irrespective of whether you want it, irrespective of whether you get a certain kind of buzz from it that leads to enjoyment. No. That's not the case Academy of Ideas is making. He's just saying danger in and of itself is good. Because it's courage. It's courageous. So courageousness in and of itself is good. And I'm saying courageousness can only instrumentally be good when there is a foe to vanquish, which for most of us in ordinary context, day to day, it's just not the case. No, our foes are cerebral foes, right? There's a kind of cerebral competition we're in, either occupationally or intellectually, in this kind of environment that I'm immersing myself in now, the YouTube environment or Reddit environment or any kind of, that's the kind of foes we have to vanquish. But it's not, this has nothing to do with courage. You can be a complete wuss and be the reigning YouTuber of the year or whatever, just because it's all about rhetoric.
Risks in the face of an uncertain future, and to display courage and bravery in the presence of danger. Historically, some of the most prosperous societies, ancient Athens, Renaissance Italy, 19th century Britain, were among those that were most oriented towards experimentation and the taking of risks. In taking the opposite approach and in showing a strong preference for safety over risk-taking, the unfolding of the human potential is not actualized but stunted.
No evidence for that whatsoever. The unfolding of human potential now is going to be something that is technologically adduced.
For it to develop on an individual level and to advance as a species, exploration of the unknown and experimentation with novel ways of interacting with the world is a necessity.
But see what he does there. Novelty. So now novelty is something that makes a life necessarily go better. Novelty as opposed to like sameness. So you don't want to have too drabby a routine. You always want to explore and do new things. But then again, why inject danger? Why treat danger and novelty as almost the kind of synonyms the way he just did? No, I'm open to the possibility that just novelty in and of itself is just one of these ingredients, whether it's preferred or not, whether it's enjoyed or not. It could just be one of these ingredients that just makes one's life go better. But that's one claim, and it's a huge stretch to go from that to say kind of danger-adjusted novelty. Novelty that makes your heart pound and, I don't know, leave you with PTSD. Like, that's going to be conducive to your flourishing. There's just no evidence for that whatsoever. He's just kind of setting people up to end up with PTSD and then saying, like, you would have had a bad mental health had you not pursued a danger-adjusted novelty. He's like, no. If anything, your mental health would go better if you don't put yourself in situations where you're going to end up dealing with PTSD for the rest of your life. Like troops do. A lot of troops do.
And this entails taking risks and confronting danger, but such is a price that must be paid, as the
It doesn't have to be paid. It must be paid. It has to be paid when someone is trying to mess with you, for whatever reason. Institutionally, personally, in any kind of context. If someone means you harm, then absolutely it is dangerous to deal with them, but ignoring them is not going to do you any good either. But it's not a categorical truth. That's a situational truth. Little slippage between categorical, situational things. Always be on the lookout. Not just him, but a lot of people. They point to something that is entirely situational and then they paint it as categorical.
Alternative is to stagnate in the confines of an ever-shrinking comfort zone, to regress in body and mind, and to fall victim to anxiety disorders.
No, the anxiety disorder is usually born of things that make you traumatized. Dangerous things. Anxiety can be a product of the polar opposite of that as well, like just not enough novelty, not enough. But even then, it turns on whether you're extrovert by temperament, ambivert by temperament, introvert by temperament, all those kinds of divides he doesn't touch at all. He just thinks there's a kind of prototypical person. No, whether you need danger in and of itself associated with novelty will very much hinge on whether you are extroverted. But even then, I would think that maybe even then, evolutionary instincts do way too much quote-unquote thinking for that sort of person. And if people just had a kind of higher order awareness of that and realize that it really hits at their dignity to be that kind of Darwinian pawn of those forces, they wouldn't see anything alluring and charming. Even as an extrovert, they would be able to get their fix in a different way. But listen to what he said a second ago.
Still taking risks and confronting danger, but such is a price that must be paid, as the alternative is to stagnate in the confines of an ever-shrinking comfort zone.
Do intellectuals who challenge themselves by meeting some insane book deadline, entirely safe affair, do they stagnate every time they want to write the next book or give the next speech? Do stand-up comedians who don't put themselves in danger, they put themselves in a kind of social cringy situation perhaps, but nothing that I would categorize as danger, do they stagnate every time they perform against a bigger and bigger crowd, a more hostile, like a crowd where they know that they might very well bomb? Is that, no, that's not stagnation, but it's not dangerous. It's just kind of opens you up to embarrassment. There's a whole bunch of things individuals can do to not stagnate that have nothing to do with intense danger or even modest amounts of danger. The only way to not stagnate, essentially what he's saying, the only way to not stagnate is to expose yourself to danger. And then he doesn't argue it at all, he just declares it. And it's got 26,000 thumbs up.
To regress in body and mind, and to fall victim to anxiety disorders, depression, or other diseases of despair. A further flaw within a...
It might be the case that a certain kind of extremely extroverted person would necessarily end up depressed if they did not experience enough novelty in their life. But even there, I don't see why novelty has to be interlinked with danger.
Approach to the future that strongly favors the safe road is that it creates fertile ground for tyrannical or even totalitarian rule.
So he flashes Stalin here, he does it a couple of times, and it's just so weird. Of all the examples, Stalin as this kind of safety monger, just polar opposite of what it was. No, they were, the entire fucking project accepted brinkmanship. Just neurotic worry about who conquers which region. Oh, we can't let the West take this region because we have to be... Essentially, he's pointing to a ideological expansionist. That's how I would summarize Stalin and the whole era. It was an era that had to... they had to spread their own ideology at any freaking cost. It's what led to the brinkmanship, because the West also had their own expansionism, because they thought, well, ours is a defensive one because they're on the offense, which is of course what they said. They thought they were on the defensive because the West was going to be on the offense, and just that's how you get brinkmanship every single time. So that as your flag of safetyism is the expansionist and the person who stares brinkmanship in the face and says, let's keep pushing on. The person who can be credited with the fact that the whole world almost blew up in the early 60s, and that's his example of safetyism. Now granted, he had been dead for almost a decade at that point. Stalin had been, when things really came to that 2 minutes to midnight moment. But certainly, if he hadn't been as militant as he was prior to his death, I think that if we just had a sane person, a non-megalomaniacal person, the West and the East wouldn't have had that tense intensification of their agendas in the early 60s. So just of all the people he could have chosen, he chooses Stalin as an example of a safety purveyor.
For as Alexander Hamilton famously stated, to be more safe, they, at length, become willing to run the risk of being less free.
Well, this really turns on what is your formulation of freedom. Is freedom something that just exists on paper? So if the government has the right sort of policies, then you are free. If the government doesn't have the right sort of policies, if it's an interventionist government, you are no longer free. Or is freedom effective? Like the substantive view of freedom is that which helps you further your interests, irrespective of what it is. If it's your own kind of sourcehood, if the actions spring from your own sourcehood and agency and intentionality, or if you are just kind of propelled to it through some other kind of societal mechanism, it doesn't really matter. But it is determined, it's a sort of function telling you to the degree to which you are able to further your interests. That helps determine how free you in fact are over the course of your life. But it's not just some concept. If we're going to talk about it as something that's truly meaningful, then we can't just talk about it as something that exists on paper, just an empty formalism. It's important to not lose sight of it as an empty formalism, but if we're going to talk about it as like this thing that has a kind of comprehensive reach in determining how well lives go, then it can't just be formalized. It's got to be an effective theory.
When a society elevates safety to the position of a first-order value, freedom is...
Which we haven't done. If we had done, we'd probably have different speed limits. And just a bunch of other examples I can use, but I like the road examples. It's just so glaring that we haven't elevated it to a first-order value. If we did, we'd pull up with all kinds of nuisances to lower fatalities, to lower the number of people in ICUs as a result of car crashes.
Is by necessity demoted to the position of a second-order value, which can be trampled on by those in power who, throughout history, have disguised tyrannical intentions with claims of wanting to make a society safer. What makes matters worse?
Well, some of them have, but really, is it the case that anytime someone gathers, let's say, enough political power, too much for his tastes, that person also has these scurvy motives that they don't actually ever articulate, and caring about the safety of the citizenry is only kind of a pretense. Yeah, just give me the rundown of the leaders who genuinely cared versus didn't care. Maybe he thinks every single leader who amasses like beyond non-minimal state power, like a power in your average typical democratic Western society, all those leaders don't really care. They're not really passing seatbelt laws and all these other things. They just want to kind of, I don't know, do what? The road to serfdom? Oh, I just covered that. Decade after decade, there's no creep in totalitarianism. So this is kind of a power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That kind of boilerplate. And so really, if you really do believe that, I encourage everyone who really thinks that that is the kind of the pinnacle of wisdom in political theory to nod along to the statement, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you had a chance to take just two figures who are very different among each other, very different in terms of their moral character, from as best as we can observe, people like Charles Manson on the one side, let's take someone else from the 60s, around that same era who was popular, Fred Rogers. So we have a kind of saintly figure, and we have a kind of devilish figure. And if you just had to give absolute power to one of the two of them, you would just what? You would toss a coin? Because it doesn't matter, because the moment either of them obtains absolute power and can't relinquish it and has to keep it, they would sooner or later end up just absolutely corrupt, and the states of affairs would be equally bad. You see, no one would actually toss a coin, because we know it doesn't corrupt absolutely. It corrupts to the extent that the person was corruptible to begin with. And it could be the case that most people are, to a large degree, corruptible, but they're not absolutely corruptible. And if you have your Fred Rogers versus Charles Manson, I'll argue it. You are making a mistake by just tossing a coin in thinking that it'll just end up equally bad, because they'll both be equally deranged by the power they're given. And that ties into the safety thing as well. You can have people pass policies in the name of safety, in the name of welfare ultimately, using safety as a proxy for welfare, without having the alternative motives and wanting to be a totalitarian. That is not some naive view. That is, in fact, if you look at the bureaucrats who are in these meetings, in these committees, that is, in fact, what they're aiming for. They're aiming to be efficient with the policies they pass because they want to be reelected. There is accountability.
Is if a society socializes people to be fearful of the future and overawed by uncertainty, the masses will welcome or openly call for authority figures.
Another big flash of Stalin. I'm not going to repeat myself, I covered that.
To protect them, or as Faraday notes, relieving people of the burden of freedom in order to make them feel safe is a recurring theme in the history of authoritarianism. Given that
no one's going to be relieved from the burden of having to every single day make certain decisions and trade-offs in terms of what's too risky and what's maybe not risky enough, like to achieve something. Maybe you do certainly take on a certain risk. I mean, even in these totalitarian societies, people had to wrestle with those kinds of decisions. Much less so than in an open society, but it's just never the case that people are going to kind of just... The cradle to grave is never really a cradle to grave. It's always cradle to age 18 or 21, and then you're, for the most part, on your own. And this is just alarmism to portray the average Western society now as like people aren't out on their own. No, there's always kind of a state bottle that's always being, like, they're always got a little state pacifier in there, right? No, they don't. They make a bunch of decisions. They're unnerved by them. The most you can point to is these concrete policies about seatbelt laws and helmet laws and shit like that. And yeah, what's the counterfactual? If someone showed you the counterfactual where none of those laws were passed, but you just saw all the people who flew through the window, would you still say that, oh, that's still worth it because you constrain their freedom, your notion of freedom, formal freedom on paper? But it significantly ruined their life.
a society which deifies safety is also a society...
See what I tell you, deify. So 5 minutes ago, live a little more dangerously, and now saying we've deified safety.
Ripe for tyranny. It is up to those who favor...
It's not ripe for tyranny. The very societies you're ragging on are some of the most democratic, open societies, as per political scientists, open societies in the history of human civilization. But you're saying they're the very ones who are most at risk for tyranny. It's the opposite of what the picture you're trying to tell.
Freedom to take a more heroic approach to life. For when the menacing clouds of authoritarian rule darken the horizon.
So this is also a more heroic approach to life. So heroism, when necessity calls for it, is praiseworthy. But just what exactly is this heroism as pursuing danger for its own sake? You don't get heroism through that. And you certainly... It's manipulative, I think. It's manipulative because by agreeing with him, he primes his audience to think that through belief, they can be more heroic. So to agree with him is to agree with the heroic side, and therefore to themselves be more heroic. As if like beliefs are dispositional. And it's just not true. Like, to whatever extent, whatever we believe, our courage to cowardice mashup is largely unknown to us, to most of us. And perhaps that's why a lot of these anxieties crop up. And that's why this completely irrational write-up that he's got going here is met with so much praise. This is one way for people to convince themselves that yes, they are the heroic ones by upvoting a video like this. But really, you have to show it through deeds, not through abstract beliefs. And I have some amount of empathy for people who are like unnerved. Like, where exactly do I stack up? How many people in this society are braver than me? How many people am I braver than? How many people are more tenacious than me? How many people am I more tenacious than? Like, we never really know the answers to these questions, but it's understandable even for intellectuals to sometimes find themselves pondering these things. But what you really got to do is just understand that what is at the root of that, and what is at the root of that are these evolutionary drives and instincts. We care about it for ancestral reasons. We don't care about it for high-minded reasons. And he's just kind of exploiting that and trying to make them seem as if they are high-minded reasons. So one solution to that would be actually to have an AI that can just imprint on us and just show dispositionally where exactly each and every one of us stack up on the courage to cowardice bell curve. That can be some sort of timeless grade. So we're being graded against some sort of objective standard of what is sufficiently courageous, or it can be something that's entirely relative. so we can have a kind of positional arms race, and each generation can have its own kind of little intra-generational bell curve, and that's how each person can stack up within that bell curve. And I think once everyone kind of knew where they fall on that, it can include courage and cowardice. It can include just brute strength and weakness, brute fighting capacity, brute like kind of psychological zest and grit, all these different things. You can assign people different scores. I'm sure if people actually just knew where they stack up, they wouldn't be upvoting this kind of video. Because what this video does is just it exploits that lack of knowledge. We have no way to means test ourselves. And certainly no one comes around and says that that's what actually drives that sort of curiosity. Your lack of certainty is where you exactly fall, makes you thumb up the video, makes you praise the video, comment positively on a video like this, because then you are signaling through belief, because you can't do it through deeds, but you are signaling through belief that you are on the side of the courageous and the heroic. And that's a mistake, because beliefs are not dispositional. Beliefs are purely reason-based and doxastic. You can be highly courageous and yet favor safety even to a larger extent than I favor it. So maybe you think that like I'm making a mistake by not wearing a helmet when I ride my bicycle, not motorcycle, but a bicycle. You can think I'm making that mistake, where I would say, look, I never drive my bicycle that quickly to wearing a helmet, so I'll take my chances with the cops stopping me and potentially giving me a ticket. You can be more courageous than me and believe that I'm making a mistake and thus be more pro-safety. Because there's the belief, which is largely an abstract affair, and then there's the dispositional profile. And that's just a point that needs to be made whenever you run into a video like this. He's using the power of the abstract to mess with people's heads, whether he knows it or not, to mess with people's heads and to exploit their uncertainty and insecurity of where exactly they fall. How many people can they surmount within their own social circle or society? And it is really that which makes them, it's like, yes, this is what I believe, because by believing this, I'm on the heroic side. But no, you can be on the heroic side or the cowardly side, irrespective of what you believe when it comes to what is intrinsically valuable and important and indeed choice-worthy. That will not predict just as I'm saying with my own case. Someone who's more heroic than me, like a Navy SEAL, can tell me, hey buddy, put a helmet on. I know you think you're riding your bike too slow for the helmet to be necessary, but it's still concrete. Concrete is concrete, and why mess yourself up when you can just easily put the helmet on, right? So it's like, that Navy SEAL is a bigger pussy than me because I know not to wear the helmet. It's like, no, clearly the Navy SEAL is more courageous than me, even if it's kind of an ex-Navy SEAL who hasn't been doing anything for a number of years. Just the fact that he made that elite league camp is enough for me to realize that he's probably in any given circumstance he would be more heroic than me if some actual danger cropped up. The fact that I am more risk-taking when it comes to driving my bicycle without a helmet, it doesn't begin to show that I would therefore also be more courageous than him. And let's just say the world's most decorated Navy SEAL. And that's how you gotta view this kind of garbage that kind of tries to intermingle the belief and the disposition. No, your beliefs are it's a completely non-overlapping circle. And it's ought to be, that has to be appreciated.
Unless more people are willing to take risks and face danger in the service of values such as freedom, justice, peace, and social cooperation.
Social cooperation, so all those things, yes, if the only way to be in service to them is through danger, then yeah, for impersonal reasons, impersonal societal reasons, and perhaps even global reasons, you have to face danger in those specific circumstances where, had you not faced it, those values would have been trampled by the evildoers or whatever. But the last one, social cooperation, I don't know if you can get that from his perspective, because a lot of times social cooperation means someone insults you, kind of takes a stab at your honor, what you may view as your honor. Well, you really shouldn't cooperate with a person like that. You shouldn't tolerate a person like that. that kind of strike, that kind of blow to your dignity, these people use honor and dignity interchangeably, you ought to go to war with them. And I just know from me, day to day, dealing with people, it's like all the time, I cooperate with them socially, but I have no respect for them. And if I didn't believe in social cooperation, there's no other value. Like, if I had an honor-sensitive view of what makes a life go well or worse, I don't see how I would be able to rationalize to myself continuing to cooperate with people socially who really, I mean, I do have to kind of resist the urge. If I spend enough time listening to them, sometimes colleagues, I'm sorry to say, I really do have to resist the urge to just walk up to them and just smack them in the head. Because they're really just that sloppy in their commentary. But I don't do that because I'm a civilized person who puts a significant amount of weight on stability and safety and just, yeah, peaceful dealings.
The grip of tyrants will only solidify, or as John Stuart Mill put it, a man who...
John Stuart Mill, who didn't want, I mean, he gets labeled as a classical liberal, but it's such a mislabeling if you actually read him in depth and see just how many things he wanted the government to oversee, regulate, and perhaps even steer in the way of the economy. He was one of the first people who wrote about worker-managed, worker-owned, worker-operated industries. And then the government kind of oversees it and provides the blueprints for it. Not like not entirely like locally created. No, but kind of, the federal government can come in and do some of this. So it's just funny, he's using a guy who wasn't like this tightly principled, minimal state and no more style political thinker. And he's just really shouldn't cite those kinds of thinkers because, yeah, they were welfareists. I know he's referred to as a utilitarian, but his utilitarianism was premised on a theory of the good, which was welfarist.
Who has nothing which he is willing to fight for, nothing which he cares more about than he does about his personal safety, is a miserable creature who has no chance of being free, unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men than himself.
So there's four things here, right? There's the pro-danger view, there's the danger-skeptical view, danger-averse view, there's the impersonal ethics view that says, yeah, even as an individual, sometimes you have to sacrifice for whatever the greater good is. And then there's the personal/agent relative approach to ethics. But he just completely fabricates from what is a fourfold dilemma into a twofold dilemma, and then he tries to merge the pro-danger perspective with the impersonal approach to ethics and the danger-skeptical perspective with the personalist, agent-relative approach to ethics. And of course, once you do that, well, sure, the danger-skeptical person is necessarily going to be the selfish person who never wants to sacrifice for any reason. But clearly, that's not. No, you got to approach the problem from a fourfold angle. The fourfold angle says the danger skeptic can be both agent relativist or agent neutral proponent of moral philosophies. Whichever moral philosophies those are, they are undergirded by a kind of agent neutrality, which says that in a lot of circumstances, you can be expected to sacrifice greatly if it is, in fact, clearly for the greater good. And if those sacrifices entail danger, come what may, they often will entail danger or a guarantee of some great harm coming your way. But the moment you just scrap that fourfold approach and just stick with it too, well, then you just you've kind of prophesized the conclusion you want to have. It'll be very convenient for the case you want to make. But there's absolutely no reason for us to accept that twofold binary view. It's not a binary view. It's not even a fourfold view. There's far more, but I'm just turning to the big four things that are at play here that he wants to simplify, because he wants to treat anyone who has a skeptical approach to danger for danger's own sake as someone who would never be willing to make a sacrifice for what they view as the greater good. It's a slimy sophistry.
As role models for the task of living more heroically, we can look to the ancient Greeks, a civilization that rightly held safety to be a secondary, not primary value.
I think you want safety to be a dead last value. Right, like if you can increase someone's welfare level over their lifetime, let's say you bump them up from a 50 to a 90, but as a result of that, you decrease their danger exposure level by just a tiny little smidgen. Let's say it was at a 50 initially, just like their welfare level was, but you decrease it from a 50 to a 40. Is that the sort of trade-off you'd sign up for? A huge gain in welfare, a modest reduction in danger exposure. Is that also someone, like, I would sign off on that, but does that also mean that I've deified safety? You can pose so many of these kinds of trade-offs that he doesn't touch. And then would you say that it's not just for you, but it's for someone else who puts a stamp of approval on that sort of thing for their own life? Would you tell them they're making a mistake? At most, you might be able to argue that they're making a prudential mistake. It'd be a very hard argument to make. But see, it's worse than that, because he's so gung-ho on the ancients. He would say that because it's a prudential mistake, it is also thus necessarily a moral mistake as well. Just because you're kind of minding your own business, you're not willing to subject yourself to as much danger to get this huge, massive boost in welfare. Oh, you're also a less moral person as a result of that. It is just so backwards on so many levels.
And which saw risk-taking and facing danger as morally commendable.
They're morally commendable!
Danger, wrote Albert Camus, makes men classical, and all greatness, after all, is rooted in risk.
All greatness, after all, is rooted in risk. I would say that it'd be an overkill statement, even if you said 10% of all greatness that has ever been achieved was rooted in risk, let alone all. It is such a fantastically, cartoonishly over-the-top statement. Like, Alan Turing wasn't great, according to these people, because everything he did, well, he just kind of toiled, but yeah, his pursuits weren't rooted in risk. How many other names do I have to drop before these people, if they watch a video like this, would go, oh yeah, we may have kind of overdone it. Quoting Camus, danger makes men classical, and all greatness, after all, is rooted in risk. I'm sorry, that's a lot of people there who achieved the greatness they did for reasons that had nothing to do with risk. And now you've committed yourself to saying they weren't great after all, when it's just so obvious that they were, and we are reaping their benefits. We are standing on the sort of shoulders of them. They were the giants. We get to enjoy the fruits of their greatness in so many different ways. But now we're supposed to think, oh no, it wasn't great after all because it wasn't rooted in risk. Fuck you.
Friedrich Nietzsche was also a proponent of this classical approach to life, and he praised Pericles, the Athenian leader who in his famous funeral speech celebrated the Athenians' indifference and contempt for safety,
So it's not just let's downgrade safety to a second order value. No. Let's kind of point out that Athenians talked about it in terms of indifference and contempt. See, again, more crisscrossing. Modest and immodest claims about safety.
in life. Contrast this to the modern world, where, to paraphrase the author Christopher Cocker, we tend to deprive the bold risk-takers who spur safety of the fullness of their lives in order to support the smallness of our own.
I don't think we do that at all. Like, are we really hunting down the parkour people, the daredevils? Are we... I mean, you really think that Jackass 4 is not going to be a box office smash like Jackass 1, 2, and 3 were? That's the best example of bold risk-takers. No, we're not going to condemn them for being over the top. And you know why? You know why that crew is, to this day, likable? I've always found them to be a really likable group of guys, even though they're boneheads, but they're extremely likable. You know why? It's because they don't look down on the people who wouldn't do what they do. They don't think that they are better people. They're better entertainers, but they don't think their bold risk-taking makes them better moral agents. If they constantly look down on the risk-averse or even the risk-intolerant, if they did nothing but look down on them, you think they would be anywhere near as popular as they are if they made the viewer at home feel like shit for not being willing to, whatever, staple things to their balls and dicks and all the stuff that they did, right? All the death-defying stunts that they did. No, they wouldn't have been likable, anywhere near as likable as they actually were. You can watch every single Jackass episode or movie, and certainly this upcoming one as well, and never feel judged by them because they're far more risk-taking and perhaps braver, who knows, than the masses that are watching what they've done. Anyway, I don't know why I went into this tangent about Jackass. I guess I'm just stoked that the movie's coming out. I thought that they surely would never release another movie after Dunn died, so I'm just counting down the days. Some of the best times in my life go back to the 2000s, going to the theaters to watch all 3 Jackass movies and just laughing my ass off. So I guess it's worth mentioning in a movie that, in a video that tries to, I don't know, just a polemic against safety. So I might as well say that I'm not some pro-safety absolutist, in the sense that I think the Jackass guys, I wouldn't stop them from doing what they're doing.
Fortunately, we don't need to wait around for politicians to pass legislation to approve of a bolder approach to life. We just need to live in this.
There's all kinds of bolder approaches to life that don't involve death-defying stunts, that don't involve, even novelty, right? You could just do what you're familiar with, but try to do it in a narrower time span, or just like whatever. If you lift, you could just try to lift far more than you did before. That's kind of a bolder approach to a practice that you're fairly familiar with. Just set new limits for yourself, but things that are just completely familiar to you, but then just doing better and better. That's kind of a bolder approach to what you find meaningful in life.
Manner. We need to look at the uncertain future not merely as a source of threats, but also of hope and opportunity. And we need to see risk-taking as justified when in defense of cherished values, or
in defense of cherished values. But no, you actually just said for one's own sake not too long ago. So if you get the cherished values right, if you are up against whatever menace that's now creeping, okay, be bold, be risk-taking. Don't run away from the menace and leave a bunch of innocent people at the mercy of the menaced figure. But that's not the average person. That's not their cost-benefit. Their cost-benefit analysis that they ought to think about critically has nothing to do with any of that. So you're not talking about defense of cherished values. You're just an adrenaline junkie. The people in your comment sections kind of are trying to showboat about being adrenaline junkies, but I don't know. I don't think you are. I don't think anyone who quotes Nietzsche's quotes about the ships heading off into the unknown horizon and stuff like that. No, none of you people would be on the internet anywhere near as much as you are if you actually did undertake these, cruise ships to nowhere.
Or in the pursuit of worthwhile goals. By demoting safety to its rightful place as a secondary value, we will cease living as a helpless pawn who must be coddled from youth to old age by an authority figure.
So he's the pawn because he doesn't know what's ultimately driving him to make these points, and certainly all the people in the comment sections don't know what's driving them. It's just a kind of fitness signaling, like I said before. By believing stuff that seems complementary to heroism in and of itself, like I become the hero at the level of the deed. And so it's just fitness signaling. It's just kind of trying to impress chicks in a way that is very unusual and very, what's the term? I forget the term now. But yeah, this is sublimation. If you want a clear-cut example of it, it's right here. It's this comment section, trying to just take shots, tilting at windmills, thinking that they are far more heroic than the vast majority of the people in their society because they find something wise in a video like this. No, you actually have to demonstrate it. And I would say even if you demonstrate it, it's in poor taste to go around showboating, and it's just really embarrassing and cringy to showboat on the internet, an internet comment section, that all this stuff you're talking about, all these things that you think you may have pulled off, you can't demonstrate worth a crap. And there's no videos on your channel, and so there's just no proof. So it's just like, yeah, we can all huff and puff, but we're not blowing any houses down if we're online. So you might as well not talk about how you blew the house down when there's no evidence of it.
And we will regain who must be coddled from youth to old age by an authority figure, and we will regain the ability to shape the course of our life.
By an authority figure. But see, to me, it's like from youth to old age, but really it's from youth to age 18 or 21 at most. And so that's like, the problem is often parental overreach, not necessarily governmental overreach. But how often are they railing against parents? How often are any of these people railing against the fact that their parents may have imposed curfews? Like, if you do a Control F in the comment section and you search authoritarianism or totalitarianism or tyranny, well, you'll get a lot of results. But you do a Control F and you search for curfews, like some parents are well known for, constraining and meddling in other individuals' lives, like their children's lives. It hasn't come up yet, despite thousands upon thousands of comments. So that's interesting. But I don't want to get into that too much because I'm doing a blog post on that, and I'm going to be very precise. I'm not saying parental overreach is necessarily something that no parent should ever do. Perhaps sometimes the overreach will contribute to the bettering of the life outcome of the individual. Though I think more often than not it doesn't, it worsens the life. But it's just something that we should have in our vernacular. Just like we have government overreach in our vernacular, we ought to have parental overreach in our vernacular. Because I think really most people are made worse off far more often as a result of parental overreach than government overreach in these Western democratic societies. But I'm compiling data on that, and that's going to be within the blog post. There's going to be a lot of just purely conceptual analysis, different timeline comparisons in the blog post, but I will pack a lot of punch with empirical data as well. But this is just kind of a prelude to that post, this rant on parental versus governmental overreach. I think it's a fascinating topic. No one thinks about it as a kind of comparative thing. They would it's almost as if people would, if they have to deal with the worst of the worst in terms of parental overreach, versus just a tiny little smidgen of government overreach, it's like they would think that they would rather exist in a society where they have a little bit of government overreach, or where they don't have a little bit of government overreach, but they have the worst amount of parental overreach, as opposed to the vice versa of that. And it's just, it's psychologically peculiar that anyone would think that they're on firm ground when they reach those kinds of conclusions.
We will mature psychologically and become better equipped to cope with whatever the future brings. For as Nietzsche explains, danger alone acquaints us with our own resources, our virtues, our armor and weapons, our spirit, and forces us to be strong.
So give him a lie detector test. Give all the people who nodded along to this quote, just give them a lie detector test and just put emphasis on danger alone. Do you actually believe that it is only through danger that you are acquainted with your own resources, your virtues, your armor and weapons and spirit? And it is only danger that forces you to be strong. And you can't just observe either other types of adversity within your own life that have nothing to do with danger, but that nonetheless, adversity and danger are not synonyms. You can face a whole bunch of adversity and it needn't have anything to do with danger. And you don't even have to have a hands-on dealing with adversity. You can actually observe. You can have a second-hand account. You can observe other people deal with adversity, and that can equate you with your own resources, virtues, armor, weapons, spirit, because you think it's unjustified, whatever they're dealing with, to the extent that they are innocent agents. So it is just through the vicarious experiences that you can cultivate virtues and force yourself to be strong in your endeavor to assist those individuals. So danger is doubly mistaken to say danger alone, and then to a lesser mistake, adversity alone. I would say it's also to an extent mistaken. You don't have to experience it hands-on. You can just see that there's enough people. To the extent that you are kind of just at the level of temperament, you are merciful. you don't kind of recoil from your own mercy, the mercy you feel for others and the empathy you feel for others. Danger doesn't have to figure into it whatsoever.
First principle, one must need to be strong. Otherwise, one will never become strong.
No, one must need to want to help others, which is hard to do if you are the opposite of strong. If you're weak in a number of ways, and you see that there's things that need to be done, individuals who need to be helped, causes that need to be promoted, you can just see what's going on in the external world. It doesn't even have to emanate from somewhere deep within. And when you're thinking about your own journey and life trajectory, you can just do an entire cold clinical analysis of the world and become strong without even thinking about strength along the way, about how strong to weak, just where you fall on that spectrum, because it's always a spectrum. And you can just do it and one day wake up, find yourself strong. It's like, holy shit, I didn't even notice this transformation in me. I was just focused on doing stuff for other people who were extremely badly off, and through that I inadvertently made myself stronger. That's very much possible to do. But on top of this, there's just a whole bunch of hereditary based things that you're omitting. It will often be the case that people who inherit deficiencies, deformities, are going to be overthinking this sort of stuff, and those who don't, even though they don't have to work on their strength to weakness profile, let's say, will end up, just because of these heritable aspects, will end up stronger than those who spent a bunch of time pursuing it because they had that deficiency and insecurity to begin with, and noticed it lacking in themselves, just genetically. Like, there are people who spend far less time in the gym, for example, but are just genetically prone to having kind of musculature and stuff like that. So they do the bare minimum, and then there's other people who bust their ass nonstop, but at the end of the day, the person was just kind of genetically endowed with musculature or size or whatnot, is going to be stronger. So, first principle, one must need to be strong, otherwise one will never become strong. No. Way too categorical, way too absolutist. It's just all about what kind of dice you roll in the genetic lottery. It's not all about that, but it's to a large extent just about that.
While taking greater risks and flirting with danger can shorten one's life, it is helpful.
That's the closest you got to talking about the downsides. It can shorten one's life. No. It has shortened tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if we're just talking about the modern era in a global context, lives, and has left far more people from paralyzed to just in constant pains and aches and metal inserted into their toes and arms and whatnot. And yeah, I'm sure if you just interviewed enough of those people, the majority will say, oh, I didn't need to do any of that shit. Especially if they did it when they were younger. So I don't think you got the majority if you actually bother to turn this into some sort of a research program, and so we can just test subjects. I think the people who will have buyer's remorse from doing this sort of stuff will far outweigh the people who don't have buyer's remorse.
To remember that a long life is not necessarily a good life. A safe life, lacking real challenges and absent in adventure, is inert and leads to a withering away of body and mind into staleness, repetition, boredom, and stagnation.
Research needed. How can I say it in many different ways, right? Citation needed, research needed. There's so many things you can do to not end up, how did he put it?
Study of body and mind into absent in adventure.
Body and mind. You can't just safely work out in a gym. You can't just go for a jog safely. You can't just take these online boost your mental acuity exercises and quizzes and stuff like that. All those things are safe. They'll keep you from going, how did he put it?
Sure, is inert.
Inert. You can't stave off inertness through safe methods. You have to do it dangerously, and I'm just going to declare it and not even anticipate the simple objection, fuck's sake, and rewarded by the thousands. And this is the stuff that is actually here to educate the normies. It's like, yeah, the normies are worse, but are they really that much worse than you, Academy of Ideas? Are they really that much worse than the crowd that cheers you on? I don't think they are.
Leads to a withering away of body and mind into staleness, repetition, boredom, and stagnation.
Citation
Such is not living, it is mere existing, or as the Roman Stoic Seneca put it, there is no reason for you to think that any man has lived long because he has gray hairs or wrinkles. He has not lived long, he has existed long.
Yeah, there's people who take shrooms for the first time and they say, oh, I haven't lived until I've had this fantastic fun experience. They don't say fantastic, but that's how I would phrase my shroom trips. I didn't have any great insights. It was just a fantastic fun experience. I had a lot of fun, especially listening to music. But the thing is, whatever pet curiosity a person has, they will, at their worst, at their most gullible, think that because they have it, like, I haven't lived until I've experienced this great thing, whether that's a great trip, whether that's a great scholastic accomplishment, the graduation day. I haven't lived until I had this great ceremonial thing with the graduation. If it's having a child, seeing their child born, oh, I didn't know what it was like to be alive until I saw my little baby in my hands or whatever. It's like, whatever it is, people think that, people go one step too far in saying, now I'm living, I wasn't living before, I was just existing. So why are you different here by inserting danger as the difference maker, the all-encompassing difference maker between living and existing, when I can point you to all other sorts of things that all other kinds of people with monomaniacal interests thought, ooh, yeah, that's the thing. It's the trip. It's the diploma. It's the child that I get to now rear. I didn't live before that. No, you're just embarrassing yourself in the exact way as all these other people embarrass themselves. The sharp divide between living and existing. So many people can tell stories with whatever it is that really tickles them, and none of it involves danger as the difference maker. So why would you inject yourself in that long line of irrational people? And again, no evidence, no nothing to back it up with like actually existing individuals who have come to that sort of same conclusion.
In addition to helping one live more fully, a courageous willingness to take risks and to flirt with danger can turn us into a great benefactor of mankind. For so long as
It can, but so can solving the big mathematical proof, or whatever, something Bill Gates did that's controversial, but I'm going to use Bill Gates because I can't think of any other great inventor. Right, these great inventors didn't invent their way to their discovery by exposing themselves to danger.
Values that guide us and the goals we pursue are noble and life-promoting. Courage reveals a...
Life-promoting! So again, he's haloing the word life. It's just so tedious. You can halo it if you think whatever exists within life has far more of whatever it is that you are designating as the good than the bad. But by his own reckoning, there's far more cowardice now than there is courage. Thus, to eliminate that disproportion of bad to good, bad kind of swamping the good, swallowing the good, a lifeless state of affairs should be superior. But he won't rate it as superior no matter how much more cowardice there is swamping courage. Really, you can make it so that for every 1 billion people, there's only one courageous person, and like slightly courageous person, and he will still say that the lifeless state of affairs would be worse, even though life contains far more bad than good, as per this preponderance of courage to cowardice. Existential adventurists.
Caring attitude for the well-being of others. For unlike the coward who is concerned primarily for his or her own safety.
Yeah, so see? If you take the safety view more so than the danger view, you're only applying it to yourself. You wouldn't sacrifice yourself for other people's safety or welfare ends. But that's a leap, as I explained like 10 minutes ago.
And who demands everyone else conform to his or her neurotic ways. The hero is willing to risk life and limb in the service of values that move society forward. Or as Alistair MacIntyre wrote in After Virtue, a study of moral theory. If someone says that he cares for some individual, community, or cause, but is unwilling to risk harm or danger on his, her, or its behalf, he puts into...
Oh God, it's going to be a weakness of will objection to whether you actually believe what you say you believe. So if you say you believe something, but your weakness of will prevents you from actualizing it, you didn't really believe what you said you believed. I'll start it from scratch.
Question to risk harm or danger. He cares for some into a study in moral theory. If someone says that he cares for some individual, community, or cause, but is unwilling to risk harm or danger on his, her, or its behalf, he puts into question the genuineness of his care and concern.
If someone truly wants to live a healthier lifestyle, whether by changing their diet or exercising more, but doesn't really go anywhere near the whole way through with it, just kind of, the whole gym membership in January thing, we know that's a phenomenon. Like, those people didn't really mean to, at that point, at the time that they got their gym memberships, no, they just wanted to throw money away. They knew they were throwing their money away because they didn't follow through on their commitment. No, weakness of will is a real phenomenon, and it doesn't mean you didn't believe what you actually claimed you believed at the time that you, well, in this example, got your gym membership. No, the person who gets their gym membership in January as a New Year's resolution does genuinely want to work out and end up whatever from enrolling in these competitions, or it's just something like you have a less flabby stomach or whatever. The same thing goes with diet. The same thing goes with not even just changing one's whole diet, but yeah, seeing that donut in 7-Eleven or Tim Hortons or wherever you go, and just not being able to resist it, even though you said the week before and you damn well meant it, I'm never having donuts again. But then you step into the store and the donut looks too good and you buy the donut and you have the donut and you feel horrible about it just after you finished having it. That doesn't mean that once you say you're going to swear off all fatty foods, all junk foods, you don't genuinely mean it in the moment. If we can have that and understand that in prudential contexts, why does it become unintelligible in moral contexts? Oh, because it's perfectly intelligible. You meant it, right? Caring for some individual, community, or cause, but unwilling to risk harm or danger on this. Yeah, you still genuinely meant what you said about caring for that community, individual, or cause.
Courage, the capacity to risk harm or danger to oneself, has its role in human life because of this connection with care and concern. If, therefore, we desire a fulfilling life, care for our mental health, and care for the future of our society, we need to act with courage and not worship at the altar of safety. We need to...
So again, just rhetorical little spins, worship at the altar of safety, deify safety. We haven't done it. If we actually were to be even on the precipice of doing it, speed limits would look far different than they do. A lot of other things would look different. All the risk that we even expose children who can't deliberate rationally about these things. Though I would actually say that the college phenomenon is really where that has gone overboard in those kind of well-known scandals documented by Jonathan Haidt and his fellow social psychologists and clinical psychologists. But that's about it. In just about every other sector of society, we're not on the precipice of overdoing safety. It's just with these weird Gen Z college entrants.
To take risks in the service of life-promoting values, and not adhere to the view that a good life is a safe life. For believe me...
Well, see, but you think that the good life will necessarily not be the safe life. You're making the far stronger claim. I'm saying it could be, it might not be, but you're saying it is automatically expelled if it is safe. Whatever it is short of being good or good enough. Because you're an anti-pluralist, dogmatist, and more people should call you out.
He wrote Nietzsche, The secret for harvesting from existence the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously. Build
Why?
your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius.
Oh,
Send your ships into uncharted seas.
that's what he said. I was trying to paraphrase that a while ago. Send your ship into uncharted seas. If any of these people did anything remotely like this, then he wouldn't upload anywhere near as often as he does, or the sort of familiar usernames that I see commenting on his videos, they wouldn't be familiar, because they'd be out sending their ships into uncharted seas.
Soon the age will be past when you could be content to live hidden in forests like shy deer.
Oh no, not shy deer. Yeah, I'd rather be a shy deer if the alternative is to LARP as a hero who condemns other people they know nothing about online in comment sections for not being heroic enough. I haven't demonstrated a damn thing about this heroism that I'm apparently on board with in terms of practicing it, but I'm still going to pop into comment sections and portray myself as being more heroic and courageous than 99% of my fellow citizens, based on no evidence, based on the fact that I upload a video like this. No. And you'll never see like some of the most courageous people in society of all time, perhaps, and some of the most people who just endure the worst things. You'll never see them condemn people who can't do as much as them. You'll never see a Navy SEAL go around blaming other people for coming up short on passing all those tests, or for not even pursuing something that demanding and intense. Because Navy SEALs are actually not insecure. They actually see. Well, see, once you know that you're gonna emerge victorious in any given altercation, you're not gonna be seeking the altercation. It's kind of why the stories of the Navy SEAL who has some guy at a bar get into his face, try to taunt him, try to insult his honor in hopes of getting into a scrap with him. Like, if that guy does everything but initiate physical contact, the Navy SEAL will not engage. The Navy SEAL will always de-escalate. And it makes perfect sense when you are actually secure. But when you are insecure, that kind of poking and prodding at your honor, well, it'll just make you completely unravel. It's the equivalent if a kid came up to you, right? If a toddler, or let's say maybe a 7-year-old, came up to you and just kicked you in the shins, are you going to then smack the kid over the head because he dishonored you? No. See, the moment you know that the kid doesn't stand a chance against you, obviously you're going to let the kid get away with that or far worse things. Spitballs. I mean, I've had some dealings with this myself. All kinds of things that the kids will do to piss you the fuck off, from violence to pranks. It does kind of make you look foolish, but you're never going to get in their faces. You're never going to shake them off. You're never going to smack them around because you know they don't stand a chance against you. But if a guy your own age did it, then, you can't de-escalate because then you're the wuss. But see, that's just the insecurity. And just as we can understand that that's insecurity is at the root of it in those contexts, we can see that insecurity driven by their evolutionary instincts is at the root of their being adventure seekers and danger glorifiers. And they should be mature enough to see that. They should be able to think not just past the ABCs and the DEFs, but they should really go further down in the alphabet to see what is at the heart of these kinds of silly rationalizations. You need the danger because you're unsure about yourself. You're unsure how you would handle it. Anyone who is sure how they would handle it, or close to certain, is not going to be mesmerized by it. It's not going to put it at the center of what makes a life good. It can only be derivatively important when there's an actual danger. But if there's no element of danger, why glorify it? See, it's just there's no place in my head that explains it through something other than them being curious about how they would handle it. And that curiosity is just propelled. It can be propelled by anything other than insecurity. So Existential Adventurism, which I've written about. It's my own kind of term. I stole a term from the policy world, the geopolitical world, and I slapped existential next to it, because all these other existential terms, existential nihilism is dumb, existential absurdism is dumb. No, existential adventurism is what they are. But really, what drives it and what makes it make sense for them is an insecurity. If someone thinks it's not, if someone thinks that this is driven by high-minded reasons, let me know in the comment section. But I think this has gone on for way too long. I am literally sweating because it's only gotten hotter since I've been recording this. And let me play the last bit of it to see if there's any left, and then I'm wrapping up. Oh, the music. Right. Fair enough. Okay. I didn't mean for it to be this long, but damn it, I just got pretty into it, so the fewer seconds I waste from here on out, the better.